Ocean freight going to the Port of Long Beach is moving ahead on a record-setting pace this year because of the U.S. businesses front-loading during this global trade war. Joining me now with his State of Freight outlook is Mario Cordero, CEO of the Port of Long Beach. Mario, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation, Lorianne. It's a pleasure.
Pleasure. So let's get right to this. We have seen record numbers. We are now seeing a slight pullback, particularly in Chinese exports. What categories are you seeing a decrease in volumes?
Well, first of all, as you mentioned, we are seeing a decrease. More specifically, you're looking at a 16% decrease in Chinese imports that is coming to the United States. And I think the products that we're talking about is across the board. You know, whether it's electronics, whether it's furniture. And in terms of exports from the USA to China, of course, the farming and the grain community has been negatively impacted. But the good news, I think, is that I think the parties are moving towards some resolution or solutions, pragmatic approaches to continue the trade relationships between the two countries. So we'll wait and see. As you know, there's a pause now on many of these fees. And so hopefully good news with regard to that geopolitical discussions as we move towards 2026.
You know, you hit the nail right on the head. I mean, we have seen a lot of pauses and changes even within tariff rates with this trade war versus the last one. In terms of volumes, what can you tell me as it relates to exports? Are we seeing a pickup in exports of ag products going to China in the coming weeks?
I believe we will. More specifically, you know, the commodity of the day, the discussion was soybeans. I think that you're going to start seeing an uptick on that. So hopefully, again, per what we understand are the preliminary agreements, the soybean exports to China will certainly increase at a point where we were basically at a non-export activity with regard to that commodity to China earlier in the year.
Looking at the items on the water when it comes to the containers, Vision Platform is seeing a decrease in containers coming to the United States for November and December. What are you specifically seeing as it relates to vessel calls and TEUs or containers coming to the port?
Well, we're also seeing that decrease, Lorianne. You know, the first 9 months, we were up about 6.8%, almost 7% from our volume or record volume in 2024 year to year. Now that we move towards October, now that number is now 4% up. The good news is we're still in the black in terms of increase. The bad news is there's been a 17% reduction with regard to year as opposed to October 2024. So you're starting to see that now. And I think that was somewhat expected in terms of the fourth quarter, but it remains to be seen. Again, the resilience of the American consumer and their spending activities, I think the next 2 months will be really telling in terms of the diminishment of that growth.
When it comes to the port, a lot of people just think the port is one entity, but there are so many stakeholders, including labor. In terms of the decrease in containers coming in, that does mean that there are some longshoremen that might not be working. What are you hearing from the labor in terms of this pullback in containers, and are they concerned in terms of the diminished numbers?
Labor is absolutely concerned. Let's go back to April of this year when Liberation Day was announced with regard to the level of tariffs that we were looking to. That is 145% on Chinese products. And since that time, we've been in a period of radical uncertainty, as I termed it. And it goes back to, again, job decreases, job anxiety. But again, we're ending the year on some good news with regard to the pragmatism that the two countries are now looking to in terms of resolution. Now, the other aspect to this is, of course, prices are going up. So I think the other test that we're going to be seeing, or metric in the next, as we close the quarter, is what is that growth of consumer spending? You know, we saw limited growth in somewhere about 0.1% in the last reported month. So that's going to be a number that we're going to be looking at, because when you have reduced volume, you're going to have an impact on the jobs in the supply chain, certainly on the docks here at the Port of Long Beach.
When you look at the global trade war this time around, of course, one of the biggest differences is that it's global. But you're predominantly one of the biggest ports, as you know, for Chinese exports. Compared to the last trade war, what are the biggest things that you're seeing that's different between the two?
Well, number one, a universal, so to speak, application of tariffs, whether it's China or whether it's Southeast Asia. The first time around, this was basically limited to China. And of course, we were experiencing increased growth in Southeast Asia, more specifically Vietnam. But as you know, most of this year, that tariff application was across the board. So I think that was the biggest difference. Also, in terms of the dynamic as it relates specifically to China, we saw a real impact and a diminishment from Chinese imports and exports to China. But as I indicated earlier, hopefully that starts to change. But I think one thing that we absolutely do know, you're going to have a continued migration, so to speak, or manufacturing moving towards Southeast Asia, whether it's Vietnam, Malaysia, Thailand, even Cambodia. And of course, long term, what is that movement to Southeast Asia as we move towards India? So things are going to be changing in the next couple of years.
From one of the last conferences that I was at, there was a fear amongst some of those in the logistics industry, really worried about the federally funded infrastructure projects and that they might be pulled by the Trump administration, and particularly looking at the green projects. Port of Long Beach is trying to become the first green port, like zero emissions. In terms of these fears, what is your message to the logistics operators that frequent your port? Are any of your projects in jeopardy of funding being pulled?
Well, certainly our CapEx projects are not in jeopardy, in my opinion. Now, Lorianne, as you referenced, those projects that are considered green projects or projects that were initiated because of climate change concerns, my message to the stakeholders is the following. Number one, at the end of the day, we all agree regarding the escalated demand of energy in this country, whether it's the state of California or in the USA across the board, and certainly an escalated demand of energy in the global arena. So therefore, the real debate is, what are these energy sources? So whether it's modular nuclear, geothermal, wind, I think there's an agreement that there has to be a wide portfolio or diverse portfolio. I believe, certainly here at the Port of Long Beach, we believe that wind renewable energy is part of that discussion. So we'll let this play out as we've had with the tariffs. And let me just say this, that in terms of the global perspective on this, keep in mind that China right now has over 50% of the world's wind energy projects, more specifically floating wind projects, offshore wind projects. And why? If you debate climate change, let's set that aside. The reason, energy security. And I think that has to be the discussion going forward in terms of making sure we have that security in light of the escalated AI data center construction and infrastructure investment relating to that technology going forward.
The 301, as we know, has been tabled. So the crane tariff has been pushed back for a year, as well as the port fees. You are going to be retiring soon. What are your thoughts on the 301 being paused, and what do you fear of an impact if it's reactivated, if you will, a year from now?
Well, number one, I think it's great news that it has been paused, and I hopefully going forward we dismiss those kind of fees going forward, because again, what that means in terms of the millions of dollars that's going to cost these shippers, that's going to eventually pass on. They haven't passed it on to this point in terms of when it was collected, but at the end of the day, those costs are going to be passed on, which is ultimately an added cost to not only American business enterprises, but the American consumer. The fear that if we continue at some point to, again, put that into place, you're going to see escalated costs in the supply chain, because at the end of the day, carriers cannot bear the cost of what these ship fees are turning into. So thankfully, there is a pause, and I'm forever the optimist. I think, again, it's to the benefit of both countries, China and USA, to really come to the table and resolve their differences in terms of the trade dispute. I believe they will, because it's a win-win for both countries. Free trade, globalization is not going to go away anytime soon. We're dependent on that as a global community. And hence, again, I am optimistic at some point that we'll move beyond this fee structure in the future.
You're retiring after 20 years at the Port of Long Beach, and you have seen a lengthy list of challenges ranging from port strikes and, of course, the pandemic. What is the greatest lesson you have learned, and do you apply those lessons that you learned today?
Well, I think the greatest lessons that we have learned here, and let's go back to the COVID-19 experience. What happens when you do nothing in terms of moving from the status quo? More specifically, I'm referencing to transformation of operations, how we operate as a port. And I think the greatest lessons we learn is, well, two. The dependency of one region for our products. That is, as we looked at COVID-19, unbelievable that, here in the United States, we had a shortage of masks, we had a shortage of gloves, we had a shortage of the equipment necessary for the respiratory treatment in our hospitals. And second, the operation component in the supply chain. As you know, Lorianne, I was a big spokesperson for 24/7. I think that's going to be the challenge moving forward, how we expand our operations here in the San Pedro Bay complex. I think the good news is we've expanded our operations somewhat. But the very good news is, if you talk offline to any of these stakeholders, whether it's a railroad, whether it's a beneficial cargo owner, a retailer, they all agree we need to kind of mirror the model that we see from the ports of origin. I'm talking about a 24/7 mindset of how we operate. And the last thing I'll say this, not too far from here, Long Beach, approximately maybe 40 miles, 45 miles from here in Ontario, Amazon has inaugurated last year one of their largest warehouse facilities, 4.7 square feet of a facility, 4.7 square feet. That facility has the capacity of moving 1 million packages a day. Do you not think that at some point the Amazon state of mind, as I referred to it, moving packages 24/7, now has to trickle down to port operations, now upping or the level of operations in order to meet the consumer demand and efficiency and the escalation of what we need to do towards not only efficiency, speed, and visibility. So I think that's one of the lessons learned, that if we do nothing, things will catch up to you.
And finally, Mario, what would you consider your greatest legacy as the CEO of the Port of Long Beach?
Well, one, I have a great staff. So whatever that legacy is, it's because of the great, talented staff that I've had here at the Port of Long Beach. But I think for me, it's the legacy that we were able to prove that being a green port does not mean you diminish your standing in terms of how competitive we are. The Port of Long Beach is on the cusp of, in a few years, perhaps to be the #1 port in terms of container volume. But I think the legacy that I would like to leave, that might not be the most important metric for a port authority. It's very important, clearly, for our revenue. But the metric should be not only the container volume that you move, but what do you do to give back to the community? And what do you do to invest in terms of workforce development and assist the many neighborhoods and communities in terms of the city of Long Beach and how we are a good neighbor to our neighborhoods and communities? And you could do that and be successful in terms of your commercial endeavor.
Mario Cordero, CEO of the Port of Long Beach, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Lorianne. It's been a pleasure again.